is I, Tantus Naraman Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! Today I'm going to continue our discussion on anime series and using them in your BESM game. So I'm actually going to be doing this format a little differently now. I'll talk about it a little more in my vlog, which I'm going to have on Sunday. But for now, just know that I'm combining both episodes into one, and I'm only going to be doing 4 episodes a week. I'll describe why I'm doing these 4 episodes. So the new format is, I'm going to talk about the anime, and then I'm going to talk about using in the BESM game. So let's start talking about the ones I'm going to talk about today. The first 2 are going to be from this season's animes, actually. Woo! So I'm getting into some new stuff. And the other 2 are going to be from the fall 2015, around there at least. Anyway, so let's start with the ones from today. Today I'm first going to talk about Active Raid Season 2. Now, this is the 2nd season, so there is a 1st season out there that you can watch. So it's the near future, and there's this technology that's been developed called Active. And this has led to new types of crime and new types of criminals, and eventually the police force has to respond in kind, developing and using their own mobile armors called willwares. So this anime is all about Unit 8, a section in the police force that uses willwares to fight people that use them themselves, so criminals that use them. So they're like the anti-terrorist slash anti-willware task force that uses their own armors to fight against those that would. And so the series is all about them going against various organizations or people using these armors for criminal purposes. So this is, of course, an action anime. There's fight scenes with the armor versus armor. They have guns, firepower, things like that. I would call it a mecha. These are armored suits. They're not the kind of mecha that you would think about when mecha, but they have these like lighter armor suits. So it's more of a bubblegum crisis type mecha. So it's personal, like body skin armor mechas. And I would call it a police one because they're police officers. They have a lot of bureaucracy and involvement to deal with what's going on in the police force that happens, I wouldn't say every episode, but enough that you can get a sense of them being police officers. So if I'm going to use this in a BESM game, I would recommend 350 points for it. You're going to make your characters members of Unit 8. That's going to be the easiest. They're going to have their own willwares. They're going to deal with criminal activities. They might deal with some of the bureaucracy of the police force and, you know, having to get permission to use their armor and stuff like that. They might deal with terrorist organizations. It's up to you how deep down the rabbit hole. If you want to keep it very simple, small adventures where they're dealing with the crime of the week almost, or if you want to make a longer campaign that you have some kind of criminal organization that they're going to have to deal with. And as I said, your characters are going to be set in this area, and they should not only deal with the criminal elements and using their armor, they might have to deal with things that are involvement in the bureaucracy. That might be something that they need to do in order to get permissions and stuff. Also have them deal with stuff as themselves. Have them deal with stuff as just the normal sort of police officer without the armor, because that's a very interesting dynamic that maybe they have to sort of pick up the mantle of the person sometimes. So the next series I'm going to talk about is Alderamin in the Sky. Our story revolves around Ikta Sorlak, who's this sort of genius strategist in this medieval kingdom, if you call it, or semi-medieval. There are things like airships and the like in the world. Anyway, so he is a genius, as I said, and very great at strategy. And he almost gets into circumstance where he ends up having to go into the military, which, because of his past, he really kind of dislikes the military. But he's sort of forced into it because he is a member of this empire, and the actions that he sort of did drew him into the point in time where, for the sake of ceremony and stuff, he needs to join it. And then we have the cast of characters around him that are his friends and allies, and he's even friends with the princess of the king of the empire. But regardless, this cast helps him along his way as he sort of forms himself into this genius tactician and officer, and eventually sort of gains more purchase and influence in the empire. So I definitely call this one a military. They're officers, they lead troops, they have all these kind of military involvement and little things that definitely scream at you military. I would call it also a fantasy. It's a very fanciful world, and each one of them seems to have these little spirits which give them little abilities, or like when they're using guns, it's really sort of like this combination of science and magic. It almost seems like it's kind of interesting. And I would call it, though, a historical almost. It's set in a, like, medieval fantasy world. Maybe Renaissance, I would even call it. Like, a sort of in-between Renaissance and medieval, except it has these sort of fanciful elements to it. So it does have this kind of historical setting, almost. interesting that way. I rate this one a 5. It's actually one of my favorite ones from the new season. I've enjoyed watching it a lot. I would definitely recommend seeing it. It's a good number of episodes in, but you can definitely catch up. So now let's move on to the series that are set back from last year. So I'm going to go over a few of them, 2015 ones. Technically, the first one here I'm going to talk about has had seasons over the years, so it's had a whole bunch of seasons. So it dates back even farther. It's Durarara. Yes, that's 3 Ras. So it's set in Ikeburo. We start out revolving around this main character, Mikaido, who's moved into Ikeburo. And he himself is this high school student. He opens us up as the outsider becoming the insider on this eclectic group of characters which exist within the city itself. So not only does the city make a character in this anime, but there's this eclectic group of characters that they sort of switch in between from. There's gang members, mobsters, a Russian sushi chef, don't ask that one, a Dullahan, a headless rider who rides a motorcycle around, a street doctor, all these kind of strange characters that almost sometimes have these supernatural feels to them, but somehow work in place in the setting. And the episodes in the series sort of takes place as almost these little vignettes of each character that we switch in between these characters, and sometimes it's an entire episode around these characters. And it's their interactions with the other characters and what's going on that drives the story. So you might see a character doing something for a little bit that's revolving or involved into the main storyline and somehow, and you might not know right away how it is. So it does kind of give you this little suspense and mystery almost to it, which is very interesting. And eventually, like, the storylines will combine for the end of every season to sort of bring us into a point in time where it all gets along pretty well, and it's very interesting that way. So I call this one a little bit of an action. It does have some very good action scenes, fighting things out. Celti, the Dullahan, when she gets into a fight, it's really awesome. I would call it a suspense to a degree. It has these kind of strange stories that are interwoven, which kind of makes you think and be interested about it, and has these very suspenseful moments involved within them that makes it very interesting. And I would also call it a supernatural. There's demon swords, people with ungodly strength, the Dullahan. It has very unique supernatural elements that are woven into the story, which almost seem normal or realistic, just the way that they take them, that they don't like treat them really as supernatural, and it's very interesting that way. So I put this at 250 to 350 points when we're using it in BESM. Put your characters that they're going to be in amongst this cast of characters, but your characters that you're going to have are going to be a group in amongst them, whether or not they are ones you think would get along a lot, but they themselves might have little individual things on the side, but they're sort of going to be getting along and doing stuff together very often. So they're going to sort of be a team within this, because there are characters that tend to stick together in the anime, and so they're going to sort of represent that, a group that sticks together. And I would, either you could use NPCs from the anime, or you could make up your owns, and you just have to make this cast of characters that they're going to interact with. And then you have whatever overarching plot you want taking place, whether you're mimicking one from the anime or coming up with one on your own. And rather than doing it the way that they did in the anime, you could run it the way that you think it would be, but you could also deal with some of the personal plot of your characters. That each character has their own unique plot lines and backgrounds. You should make sure your players come up with very unique backgrounds that makes them part of this cast of characters, that you almost have to see them as main characters at the head of groups of people, is how you have to think of them almost, that each character could basically be in charge of a whole lot of other characters. And the last one I want to talk about is Shinmai maou Testament, or Testament of a Sister New Devil. This one's a very interesting one for me to bring up. It's more ecchi, I would call it, more sexualized than many of the ones. Ecchi kind of means that kind of like perverted humor almost, or perversion a little bit. For those of you that don't know, it kind of brings in a bunch of that. So, but the non-perverted parts of the series, I think, is what drives me to say suggesting it in this case and time. Though if you want to bring up stuff like that, go ahead. But anyway, let's talk about the series. So it's set around Basara, who is this high school student, but he's also a member of the Hero clan. And he meets Mio, who's in fact a demon princess and daughter of the former demon lord. Now, her and her assistant, succubus Maria, The two of them sort of encounter Basara and are eventually sort of thinking of using him, but they end up in a situation where Basara decides that he will look after them, especially because at his father's behest he sort of asked them to look after him as if he was his own sibling. So he's like, I will do this because my father asked me to. And they, of course, form sort of bond. And eventually, Mio ends up in this sort of magical bond with Basara, which unfortunately is more on Basara's side, and she gets sort of the short end of it. But, the entire relationship does help, and sort of that's where the bond gets in a little bit of the kind of etchiness, because her assistant who created the bond is a succubus, so it's based upon lust. So there is this kind of sexual tension between them a little bit. But it's very interesting that the way they do things, that they have to deal with demons that are either former servants of the last demon lord or servants of whoever's calling themselves the current one, other people that are competing to be the demon lord, while Mio doesn't really want to get involved in that. She was a normal girl or raised as one around Earth up until pretty recently, where her abilities woke up and she started getting attacked. Of course, I would call this one an action. Basara is kind of awesome when he gets into a fight. He's actually a really powerful fighter. Not as powerful as his father, who's sort of this legendary fighter along the heroes, but pretty awesome. I would also definitely call it a fantasy. The peoples of the hero can't have massive powers. There's demons who have their own abilities. There's this sort of setting that gives very well to the fantasy setting. But I will then add it's an ecchi harem. It is actually a harem. You don't think about it, but there's more casts of girls that get in there, and they all kind of like Basara, though Basara is the kind of guy that's like, he's not going to choose anyone because he doesn't need to, and he's got a job to do. So he's more the serious type, but these sort of ecchi situations get into hand with him a lot of times, and so it happens. I rate this one a 3. It's a pretty good series. As I said, the ecchi parts, if you really like that, you'd enjoy it. If you don't really like that kind of thing, I kind of feel like for the other stuff in the series, it's worth putting up with it. So for this one, I would give your BESM characters, though, 500 points. The characters are really powerful, and you should reflect that. One of them's an heir to the Demon Lord. Your characters should probably fit similar roles. Maybe you want one of your characters to be an heir to the Demon Lord. Either you can have that happen, or you should make an NPC that would represent it. Then either the remainder of the characters, or if it's an NPC, all the characters would be put into sort of that guardian relationship focused around that. Whether you have someone who's like, functions more like a Basara in the situation that draws everybody together, or if you would just have it that the situation draws that, everybody's revolving around it. But you should still keep everybody the main character, because you can do that in this situation. Yes, you have someone that's being the driving force of the main plot, because the main plot should revolve around demons and other forces going after your heir to the Demon Lord, who may or may not want to take over that position. And if they don't, that's fine. If they do, that's getting into another tired sort of story. It's varying from the anime as much as you want, and making sure that that plot works well. I mean, again, you're revolving around something, and then having your characters act it out as needed. So that's it for today. I went over these 4 anime. I went over 2 that are currently airing in this current season, and 2 that are actually from last fall's season. So getting up there. We're almost a year back in time with anime series that you might want to use in your BESM game. Making some good progress and letting you know about them. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, please leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It shows your support for me and the Empire. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.